Friday reading lesson. So we have finished reading the extract of Edward Tulane this week, and you've answered all of your questions for that. So we're going to do a one-off text now. It is from James and the Giant Peach, which is a great story. I bet a lot of you have read it. It's by Roald Dahl. So if you haven't read this one, I'm sure that you've read some of his other books. So I'm going to read you the text. If you'd rather be a bit more independent and go and read it yourself, that's absolutely fine. So just pause and come back to this video when we go through the questions. But I'm happy to read right now. So if you'd like to stay on and listen, that is fantastic. Just try and follow along with the text. Until he was 4 years old, James Henry Trotter had a happy life. He lived peacefully with his mother and father in a beautiful house beside the sea. There were always plenty of other children for him to play with, and there was a sandy beach for him to run about on, and the ocean to paddle in. It was a perfect life for a small boy. Then, one day, James's mother and father went to London to do some shopping, and there a terrible thing happened. Both of them suddenly got eaten up, in full daylight, mind you, and on a crowded street, by an enormous, angry rhinoceros which had escaped from the London Zoo. Now this, as you can well imagine, was a rather nasty experience for two such gentle parents. But in the long run, it was far nastier for James than it was for them. Their troubles were all over in a jiffy. They were dead and gone in 35 seconds flat. Poor James, on the other hand, was still very much alive, and all at once he found himself alone and frightened in a vast and friendly world. The lovely house by the seaside had to be sold immediately, and the little boy, carrying nothing but a small suitcase containing a pair of pajamas and a toothbrush, was sent away to live with his two aunts. Their names were Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker, and I'm sorry to say that they were both really horrible people. Okay, that is the end of the extract. So we can look to the side here. We have our questions for the day. So if you would like to, you can go away and do the questions by yourself and then mark them. The answers will be put onto your home learning documents. But if you would like a little bit more support, I will go through the questions now and help you find where you might get the answers. So question number 1 asks us to draw lines to match the following statements. So my first statement is that there was a sandy beach. So let me have a look and see my text. I'm going to scan quickly, and I found the word sandy beach. Okay, so sandy beach. There was the sandy beach for him to run about on and the ocean to paddle in. Okay, I can see it on my option down here, so I'm just going to get my ruler and pencil and draw up them. Because it tells us that at the sandy beach, there was an ocean to paddle in and room for James to run about in. Okay, the second statement is that something terrible happened. So again, I'm just going to scan quickly, now going further down, and there we are. It doesn't say something, but it says a terrible thing happened. Okay, my two statements left are that parents were eaten by a rhinoceros or James was sent to live with two aunts. Well, this tells us that James's mother and father went to London to do some shopping and something terrible happens. And it does tell us that they were eaten by an angry rhinoceros which escaped from London Zoo. So I'm going to connect this statement up to here. My third statement is that James was left all alone. Okay, going to keep scanning. Okay, poor James, on the other hand, was still very much alive, and all at once he found himself alone. So he found himself alone. My last statement is that James was sent to live with two aunts. So I'm just going to double check, even though it's the last one, that I've got them right. Okay, and here we find he was left alone and was sent away to live with his two aunts. So I'm quite confident that I've got this right. There we are, matches up. Okay, question number 2. Their troubles were over in a jiffy. What does in a jiffy mean? So we have it means without thinking, it means horribly, or it means quickly. So first of all, I'm going to scan my text and find in a jiffy. And I'm just going to read a couple of sentences around it to help me get a feel for the meaning. So, Now this, as you can well imagine, was a rather nasty experience for two such gentle parents. But in the long run, it was far nastier for James than it was for them. Their troubles were all over in a jiffy. So their troubles were all over in a jiffy. Well, it's saying there is to do with his parents. And we know that his parents got eaten up very, very quickly. It says here that they were dead and gone in 35 seconds flat. Okay, so that means it was quite quick. For James, it was longer. So I think it doesn't mean without thinking. Their troubles were over without thinking. Doesn't make sense. Their troubles were over horribly. Well, it was horribly, but in this sentence, it's comparing James's experience to his parents' experience. So I think for this case, it's going to mean quickly. So in a jiffy means quickly. Okay, question number 3. Why do you think the author has written that in the long run it was far nastier for James? So either because James was sad because his parents died, over time James would suffer, or James is a nasty boy. Well, having read the text, there was nothing that told me that James was a nasty boy. I've got the word nasty here, but that's talking about the experience. It was a nasty experience for gentle parents. So James isn't a nasty boy, so I can discount that one. Now, I can infer, and I'd guess that James was sad because his parents died, because that would be a pretty upsetting thing. But it doesn't really tell me here that James was sad at the time. However, this keyword here, over time, James would suffer, for this answer, can tell us here in the sentence we're looking at, but in the long run, it was far nastier for James. Well, but in the long run, it means kind of like over time, and it tells us that James would suffer. So he was sent away to live with his 2 aunts, and they're both really horrible people. So I'm going to choose that. This one, over time, James would suffer. Question number 4, what kind of text is this? You should be quite good at identifying text by now and which type of text they are. So if it was a script, it would be having people's names and perhaps some stage directions and things like that. Well, it doesn't have that. A non-fiction text it's factual, it's not made up. And this to me, well, quite clearly, not very many people go to London and get eaten by rhinoceroses. So I don't think it's that. So it's definitely going to be a fiction story. And then we have question number 5. Poor James, on the other hand, was still very much alive. Why has the author written poor James? Well, poor actually has quite a lot of meanings, but in this context, because it's quite a sad opening to the story, we can see here that poor means that he's been unlucky, he's been unfortunate. So why has he written about James being poor or unfortunate? So he no longer had troubles. Well, we know that he did still have troubles because now he's been sent to live with his 2 really horrible aunts. He no longer lives in the beautiful house by the sea. Well, that could definitely make him unfortunate. So I'm just going to put a dot next to that one because it might be one of my answers. He has 2 aunts who have no money. We don't actually know whether his aunts don't have much money or not. All we know about his aunts are their names and that they were horrible people. They were selfish and lazy, but that doesn't tell us that they didn't have lots of money. So let's look at our last one. He was all alone after the death of his parents. Well, yes, as we've said, that is true. So we've said that poor James, on the other hand, was still very much alive, and all at once he found himself alone and frightened. So yes, he was alone after the death of his parents. So I'm going to tick those 2 answers. So well done. Either of you used that to help you go along in the text, or if you had done it yourself and you've come back to watch the end of the video, well done, and I hope you enjoyed that text. And if you enjoyed the book, it'd be great maybe if you wanted to read the book now that we've been through the first little opening bit. It's a great book. I definitely recommend it.